With over 100 bosses from tales as old as time brought to the screen in stunning glare, to some questionable fights that will have you wondering why they were even there. These are all the bosses in Black Myth Wukong, ranked from worst to best. Starting with Giant Shingandong. I hope I didn't butcher the name. This was the most disappointing boss in the entire game. After a build-up quest picking up all of the Skandas in different levels of the game in mostly optional spaces, you are met with a gigantic arena to fight the boss in. The intro to the fight would have you believing that this is going to be one of the best bosses of the entire game, but it's closer to the giant stone turtles in Elden Ring. You dodge a few predictable attacks, then smack the crystals on the boss. The reward is fantastic, but for all the build up to the boss and the giant arena you fight it in, this is a horrible letdown. Incoming Mother of Stones, because you're not even really fighting the boss. This is an arena style boss that is covered in rock monsters trying to keep you away from the Mother of Stones. It's a unique gimmick to the game, but it's just not a boss we're even really fighting. The Fangtail General is a perfect example of this as well. A true gimmick boss, but part of me actually enjoyed the challenge of figuring this one out. Now, did I expect to get the Wukong helmet from this? Well, yes, because I couldn't figure out this fight for a while, so I fought the other bosses in the area, and they gave me other pieces of armor before this. But I think a boss whose whole gimmick is having fire resistance is pretty neat as a puzzle, but not as a whole boss fight. With all the awesome animals we fight later on, including a praying mantis inside of Pigsy's stomach, I think fighting a big cricket boss isn't unfair to ask for. This is a cool puzzle, but not a boss fight. Man in Stone is Wukong's version of Patches to me. This guy wants some help from me, then betrays me, then begs for forgiveness after the fight. The fight is extremely simple with some of the most basic attacks, but at least the rewards are really neat for beating him. Fungi Woman sounds like a pretty big green flag, right? You can surely fix her, pal. But realistically, this is a mushroom fungus you'd be unlucky enough to pluck for a potion. She has some pretty cool attacks like the hovering and slow fall slam with poison that you can use as a spirit summon in fights, but aside from that and looking like a bloodborne fly or a winter lantern, there isn't much substance here. What I liked more about this fight than others so far is that it's a pure fight that doesn't need a big spectacle to have a better show than the rest. Is it great? No. In fact, it's very forgettable, but it doesn't really do anything frustrating either. I do want to stress that for my list, the criteria is based on the fights themselves and not on the lore implications, the set pieces, locations, etc., but mostly on that feeling of having to fight an opponent and truly learn the moves. If you have a problem, want clarification, or have some insight that may be missing, feel free to drop me a comment. Oh, and if you've made it this far, I made this for you. To warm it up, you have to subscribe and like the video though. Thank you. 96 through 94 are the Crimson Silver cards. 3 out of the 5 elemental cards come equipped with tight, small arenas to fight them in with a variation of about 3 attacks. A fire attack, a swiping attack that can be easily avoided, and some others here and there. There isn't much to say about these cards other than there's 5 of them, and while the last one will be later in this video, the 4th one is just an interactable card. They're a part of a world quest that is pretty solid and leads to better bosses, but you're just beating the bricks off of a cart, so there wasn't a ton to work off of anyway. Buddha's Right Hand is a fight that not only came out of nowhere, but was something I expected more of. I'm not going to pretend like I know anything about Chinese mythology or Buddhism, but this fight, I was expecting to maybe fight more limbs of Buddha like it was the 5 pieces of Exodia from Yu-Gi-Oh!, but instead it's just a fight in a narrow hallway with a not great build-up. There could have been a lot more here, and it's why I felt so let down by the fight. The Bull Guard is dealt the hand of being the tutorial boss, but not with the legendary capacity of Soldier of Godric or the big voluptuous booty of the Asylum Demon. Instead, he's mostly just a regular enemy with a big boss health bar. The fight isn't bad, but it's just the intro after the intro fight for a reason. Elder Armorworm is a boss that can attack you all it wants to though. This boss is very simple as it's just a large silkworm that you can put the beat down onto, but the charm is in the fact that this boss just keeps relentlessly swinging at you, and it makes for a pretty fun fight all things considered. The Father of Stones is like a giant buff sea lion that isn't made of stone at all. The fight is smacking down on a large foe who spins around a lot and falls over, but the reason he gets a higher ranking is just the amount of health all supported by that big old booty. Keep doing you, Father of Stones, we're all bricked up together. The Flint Chief is actually made of stone, and is really only difficult by the arena you face him in. If you don't have good fire resistant potions or charms, this fight will be brutal. If you do have these, then the boss just falls over. The same sentiment cannot be shared for Long Bao Bao, the first really controversial pick on the list. A frog boss that is the final form of the frog bosses you will fight in the game has what can only be described as froggy frustration mechanics. So imagine you want to fight a boss, but instead it's a long loading screen of not being able to attack. Now imagine every time you go to attack the boss, it is covered in stone and a big gong sound plays as you embarrass yourself going to Smackdown. That's the fight in a nutshell. It's your standard frog fight that you will find throughout this video, but it frustrates me having to sit and wait for minutes before I can attack once. A lot of the early entries are bosses dealt the hand of being either tutorials, gimmicks, or just plain head scratchers. While there is some like that later on, the first ones are here for good reason. At the top of the bottom list, we have my second controversial pick, but I saw a lot of people also saying this fight was just not fun by the end, and I was happy to be far removed once the cutscene played and my achievement popped. Meet Yellowbrow. Such a confusing fight to think about since it's really like 5 boss fights in a row and parts that you're not even fighting Yellowbrow. Hell, you're not even fighting as Wukong sometimes. But by the end, I can't love the fight when Yellowbrow has parts to it where you just dodge and wait for minutes at a time. He turns full gold, has you dodging lightning with some precise timing, but the gimmicks just get old quickly. Yellowbrow was a boss I look back on after beating every single boss in the game with disdain for a reason. Maybe another playthrough would fix my feelings on him, but I'm not really sure. Those are what I'd describe as the worst of the worst the game has to offer, but none of them are really offensive outside of maybe 1 or 2. With over 80 left to cover, Wukong clearly had some big hitters in the boss department, so this will be a step up in quality from here on. The first Prince of the Flowing Sands is a boss that I would describe as all flash for little substance. A cutscene plays before the fight that has all the tellings of something special until you get to the actual fight where he just proceeds to flop around. He's got some cool attacks, but there's not much here outside of the rewarding secret area for beating him. Shenlong might fit this description perfectly as well. A dragon fight with some dragon lightning, but clearly meant to just be the entrance to Wukong's version of Fireling's Shrine. This boss will get your hopes up due to the fact that he does offer some cool attacks and other dragon bosses up to this point were spectacles, but he's just easy and doesn't offer more than a standard boss. Old Ginseng Guai is the father of the fungi woman. He shares the tradition of plucking him from the ground and the tradition of mostly basic attacks. He moves around like your drunk uncle at a wedding, but he offers some more variety of attacks than the fungi woman, and for that we respect our drunk uncle Guai. Wukong is ultimately a game of methodology when it comes to its bosses. You might find a boss completely free to kill if you froze it and spawned a whole clone army, while someone else might not fight bosses any other way than using the Spellbinder and pure staff combat. That can be said for Bao Lang Lang, which is the frog you will find inside of the Flaming Mountains. This boss can be easily stomped if you freeze, spawn clones, and summon a head bash, but I tend to enjoy these frog bosses when they're not turning into stone. What places him here and not higher is just the fact that fire can be easily conquered with the fireproof mantle, but without it, I'm sure the frog would be brutal. Bali Gaba, I hope I said that right, can be attested to this challenge too, but there isn't as much shock resist in the game like fire resist, and you would have to scale into elemental resist in general. This boss is found in the webbed hollows and actually does some good mix-ups that I like a lot, including spawning a whole AoE of lightning around you to cause shock to you if you're not paying attention to your environment, but it's also your par for the course frog fight. The 9-cap Lingzi Guai is such a goofy boss. It's like if Toad from Mario was Souls-likeified, and it had the same drunk uncle attitude that the other Guais had. Not only does he offer slams and AoEs, but he really just does bring it up a goofy notch by losing his mushroom hat midway through the fight. This boss gets a placement here for being goofy. From blood to beast, we really do love some Wukong Bloodborne in this household, as the Earth Wolf is a perfect encapsulation of what a better than bad but not quite mid boss looks like in Wukong. It has all the stomps, rolls, and swipes to land it here. The Centipede Guai holds a special place in my heart since it reminds me a lot of a roly-poly than a centipede. It's just about as threatening as one too. This boss has the arena in build-up like a great one, but the punch of a wet napkin. Now you might be wondering how the Flint Vanguard is placed higher, and the answer is that it's a rock monster with more health than a lot of them thus far who utilize the fire attacks. The Vanguard is the perfect example of this placement for a reason. You knew the final cart, being the rusty gold cart, would eventually show up, and I gotta say that it speaks to the level of what Wukong bosses have to offer if the cart is this low in the list. It's not bad, it has more attacks than the rest and sits in a large arena, It's just not great either, since it's limited by the fact that it's a rusty old cart, but he's trying his best. The epitome of uncle energy is the Yellow Robe Squire. A boss that stands the test of fetch questing in 2024 will have you getting him some meat, then fighting you, then backing off after you beat him to show you a gigantic quest area afterwards. He's by no means a strong fight, but he did offer some mix-up and a quest I quite enjoyed. The Gorai Taoist is like another boss I'd imagine from Bloodborne snuck into the game. The reward for beating the spirit might be greater than the already unique fight, giving damage and mana bonuses for staying near the staff planted. The Taoist has a generally unique fighting disposition too, as the attacks are all covered in blood and will rip your health to shreds. It's something I wish I could build into more in Wukong, but it's the unique stature that lands it here. Son of Stones has a bunch of different locations for the same type of fight, and while it's not the first boss in Mount Huago on the list, it is the first real fight to land here. The boss has some attacks you'd find standard to stone bosses, but then randomly mixes you up with lightning. I placed him here not just because of the fight that will get you killed if you're not paying attention to the lightning, but also because every stone boss is caked up for some reason. The Tiger's Acolyte is like the sword master who protects the whole secret area. He stands alone on a bridge with the sandy wind blowing against him, and he has some real raw aura. But the fight, for just how nice looking it is, doesn't offer a ton of substance. With a few more mix-ups, this boss could have been much higher, but I still enjoyed the fight. Now we're headed to where majority of the bosses find themselves, just completely average territory. So I will move as fast as I can through them since there's not much reasoning and they all kind of belong in this general area. They're just okay. The Four Heavenly Kings is a cool concept, but a boss that isn't really difficult or thought-provoking at all. This is something you can watch but not fight yourself, and was very much here for the story appeal more than the actual fight itself. I know this is technically a part of the Erlong fight, but I think it's really a 1v4 and felt different enough to give it a different placement. I do love how you finish off each of these bosses.
What did he say?
Not like that. Like this. Erlong, the Sacred Divinity, the prologue version, is a set-piece fight. It's very iconic in its massive scale that Wukong is going to give you, and it stuck out as a better of the tutorial bosses. It's by no means difficult, but it does provide some unforgettable moments. Lingzui is a boss I want someone to mod to be much more of a threat. This boss has an incredible introduction with a full cutscene, menacing presence, and some really great attacks, but it's more of a place to test your very first transformation more than anything, as this boss is super weak to fire. Love the fight, just don't like how he falls over. Balin Gulong is here for the pure first time seeing and fighting a frog. Is it the best of the frog bosses? No, not at all, but he is very much not made of stone and a pretty neat fight this early into the game. Elder Jinshi is like the Wandering White's father. Not sure that tracks in the mythology, but here in the list, it's just true. Jinshi is a unique healing mechanic with all the enemies around not only being obstacles for you to deal with, but little healing drones for him too. I like this fight a lot, all things considered, but he's just again a little too easy. Lang Li Guba is yet another frog boss, but this one is a combination of lightning and slamming attacks, and he's a part of a pretty solid quest to unlock medicine crafting. King and Second Prince of the Flowing Sands is a duo boss with one of them actually being a fight. You can easily beat down on the King of the Flowing Sands, and then the Second Prince has some nice combos back and forth. Guangzi is a tutorial boss to get you transformation spells, but he actually offers some really fun attacks for a boss this early on. This ranking might be a little bit too high, but I remember him sticking out a lot from the fond memories of Wukong. Plus, he guided all of us through the game, so we can thank him for that. Shigandong is the secret of many other secret bosses in the desert level of Wukong. After finding all the Buddha eyes and bringing them back to a previous boss arena, you will fight the tradition of yet another rock monster with a massive booty. He has all the makings of a pretty standard boss fight with all the booty of a rock monster. The Makake Chief Part 1 and 2 are both some pretty great fights for not really offering much of a challenge. I love the unique and delayed attacks presented in both fights as much as the feeling of unlocking the very strong Ring of Fire spell. No sea bears or monkeys with wings are allowed in the circle for a reason, but I did enjoy this fight a lot for him being this low on the list. I think the transformation from this chapter is stronger than the boss that we fight, but regardless, he belongs here to me. The Water Wood Beast is a hippo made out of wood. That's it. It has some nice charge attacks and does a dive attack from under, but it's also just a bigger version of a regular enemy in the area and doesn't offer much different than them. The Apramana Bat is a very frustrating boss because I don't know if it's a bug, but you can easily miss this boss if you don't trigger a cutscene for the lion turtle when you first get to the island. If you come back, the bat just won't spawn. It's a standard boss in every way, but it's just a seemingly rare fight to experience for reasons that I think are bug related. Lang Li Gulong is yet another frog for that one TikTok guy's frog army. But this one, I don't really have much of a convincing reason that this frog is higher up, but he's a Sub-Zero frog that gave me a lot of issues. Spikes of frost from massive distances and constant slowing and frost damage made it harder to dodge than the others and cost at least me a lot of deaths. Captain Kalpawave is a uterus bloodflame boss that we never knew we, I guess, had to fight. This boss is like the Hook from Toy Story if it was Souls-likeified, and it really just gets knocked around even while having some of the best potential sets of attacks with blood and flame. The second sister is one of many spider ladies in this family, and filled with many poison combos on top of web attacks and sweeping ones. I like the scale of the fight, but ultimately she's just okay. The Makake Chief is the longest version of this boss fight, and for that, I appreciate him. Even if this is technically a part of Yellowbrow's fight, and he still just kind of falls over, I found myself enjoying this one a lot more. Commander Beetle is the one teacher who is taking it all a bit too serious. I like that this is an all-out army versus army fight if you summon the clones to fight with you here, but the commander doesn't have a ton of unique factors besides having his students come to fight with him. He also has other enemies that can proc to the arena and make it really annoying to fight him. Pale Axe Stalwart is the guy who gives you the task of killing the cart bosses, and for that, we have to place him in the average category. The Stalwart is basic. He has some powerful slams and slashes, some ground attacks, but what is really neat about him is the war going on around you as you two battle. It really sets the scene for the rest of the level. The Mother of Flamelings was like something out of Berserk, a boss that you have to drop flame ore to spawn, but can be farmed from the enemies around. What makes this boss just okay again is that she has no HP, and well, she's stuck out from the ground and has no distance to cover. Still a unique mechanic to spawn the boss, and for that, we respect this mommy. Monk from the Sea is an enemy more than a boss, so he's hard for absolutely no reason and he can stay here on the list. I hate this guy so much, and I hate that he's so challenging, because he offers nothing new from his normal version, which means that all these basic enemies are basically bosses themselves. 51 through 48 are the Poison Chiefs, all 4 of them. We're grouping them together because they are basically all the same, like I couldn't find a single difference in all of them. The boss has some cool attacks that reminded me of the nasty tree from Dark Souls 3, a big old rock booty, and you know they all have those slams too. They also have a nice amount of health for a world boss, and don't hate on me for thinking this, but this looks like a rock version of a frog boss from this game. I don't know why I keep seeing it. The Wandering Wight is the perfect example of completely okay. This boss is large, has a large head, and even better spirit summon to fight bosses with. But the fight is pretty dang hard as an introduction to the game, especially if you don't have your first transformation unlocked. This boss will hit you with some wild combos that will run your health, and in my opinion is the perfect tutorial boss with a great reward. The Yellow Wind Sage is the final main story boss of the second major level, and a pain to fight if you're unprepared. This was the first boss in the game that made me rethink my build and weapon level going into the fight. I genuinely went to go for every secret I could find without the guidance to get ready for it, and I still barely squeaked out the win. What holds this boss back from being higher in this list is the fact that his attacks are really hard to see through, and all the sand and tornadoes and more. Now we head into the bosses I would consider above average, from more mixed attacks and set pieces to visual design and aesthetic. These bosses are here for a reason. Guang Mao is a better summon than a boss, but it's still a really fun fight. Ranged attacks with slithering snakes, and a tough fight this early on. He's not the hardest, but he's a unique fight that lands him here. The Black Bear Guai is a giant question mark more than a proper big boss. It's a good boss, but its placement is much like the others in the early part of the game, which unfortunately leaves it to be too easy. If this boss didn't fall over every 2 seconds and kept some massive damage chunks, there would be serious thinking of builds here. But as it stands, this is a great to watch but easy to fight boss. Stone Vanguard might be the opposite of that though in every single way. A boss that is very tough for the space that it's in, one of the few early game bosses that isn't a pushover without having much of a spectacle, and this boss really challenged me. Now I will concede that this is where a weird bug happened where the boss literally turned to stone and just stopped moving at all, but this was a pretty fun boss for being a poor design and lacking a ton of variety. The Mad Tiger is full of delayed attacks, and even more so with a long quest to get here. He has fast combos, good damage, and all the makings of something big. This is a fighter's fight. The Tiger Vanguard is the very first Tiger Vanguard that you will fight and teaches you the rock solid spell by using it on you. The boss arena is wicked, drenched in blood, and probably flies and maggots too. The boss has great combos and a really neat use of the rock solid spell against you that I appreciated. Fubon is a long quest of secrets and other bosses to get here, and I really appreciated the monster hunter fight that this was, among other types of bosses that we are already used to at this point, with even the yellow wind sage helping you to fight halfway through. This was rightfully easy because it's more of a set piece, but it's still a great reward for your exploration. Captain Lotus Vision is the man in the wall from Warframe, if he was in Wukong. Seriously, this boss is creepy and hidden for a reason. Ranged attacks and lasers are the forte. It's frustrating but fair and a great design all around. This also unlocks all the doors in the area so you can avoid the jailers. I tried to be more fair to these bosses as we continue, as I could just go on and on these bosses for all the bad qualities, but sometimes they're just good, but not something that you would really remember as a pure fight. You might remember a cutscene or a gimmick though. So as we continue and really narrow down the best, things that I didn't care much about before will inevitably come into the ranking, like environment and set pieces. I hope you understand. Cyan Long is a dragon with few attacks that are all really effective, and for that, I like him. He's a real challenge for where you find him and for what Wukong's difficulty scale brought before this. He really steps it up for being so simple. Non-Pure is one of many non-bosses in the game, and this one is a fun little optional boss due to his blocking attacks, good kicking mix-ups, and more, in a small but fun fight and arena. A welcome surprise. Captain Wise Voice is something out of Breath of the Wild to me, one of the guardians that fell into Wukong. This boss has all the makings of something truly special, but the workings of something that didn't really fit the arena it was placed in. This is tedious at times, annoying at others, but a whole lot of lasers to knock you over. I think this fight is great to watch play out, but not great to actually fight on repeat playthroughs. Venom Taoist 1 is such a sick design. This is one hell of an angry man spider. First, you have to beat the old cocoon, the boss I decided to not add to this list because it's like beating on an old man's sack and I've censored the footage for a reason, but the Taoist has some delayed attacks, lunges, and timings. This is completely optional and kicks off the beginning of many optional boss fights. But what holds it back is that there's a better version, and this one doesn't have a ton of health. The Venom Taoist 2 is here to remind you that he's still angry and has less arms now. A larger arena, better mix-ups, faster attacks, but for some reason I found this one kind of easier than the first. Maybe it's because I was expecting similar attacks, but I still think this version is better. Cloudy Mist and Misty Cloud are some goofy little guys. On one hand, they're incredibly cool as a duo fight, but on the other, it doesn't really feel like a duo fight, and more like a single boss at a time before the other one taps in. One is fiery with a log and slower attacks, while the other is fast with icy attacks, which is pretty against the grain of ice and fire, but again, these two are unique for a reason. The Taoist Me is an easy to miss great boss. After a betrayal from this seemingly nice guy, which again, you can easily miss and be locked out of a fight, so don't miss this one, you can fight this multi-stage monk, parasite, snake woman? I don't know, man. Chinese mythology is weird. Fast as wind, quick as fire? You know what? Here, just watch this. The Keeper of Flaming Mountains, or the Yin Yang fish, is a great arena with a cool opening and then an okay ending. You're fighting the Yin Yang soldiers and a fish that is definitely not Sokka's girlfriend who will turn into the moon. But again, there's a lot of waiting for brief moments of attacks. It's still really cool though. Top takes bottom and bottom takes top is the freakiest of all the bosses on the list, with a really cool dynamic of switching around you as you fight. They're not a true duo boss since they both don't attack in rhythm, but instead more like a freaky multi-stage tag team. Gold Armored Rhino is more of a puzzle than a proper fight, but I really respected that. A massive arena and a lightning horn rhino that can't be attacked until you have a fully charged staff attack to break the horn was a really cool puzzle if made all but easy once you figure out that information. Stone Monkey is a fight that I would claim is more fun to watch than fight. You can cheese this fight easy by charging the Wukong staff, but it gets some bonus points for being a true duo boss at times by having some great mix-ups and a seemingly easy boss become really difficult if you don't pay attention. Now we move into the bosses that I would consider really good. Like, almost nothing bad to say. Just assume that for the sake of not offering as much depth as the top that they find themselves here. No disrespect to these bosses. The White-Clad Noble is the first multi-phase fight and the first Czech main cutscene boss. A really strong boss this early into the game and doesn't leave a lot of room for you to breathe, especially in phase 2. The Black Wind King is a lot of timing of dodges, blocking your attacks, and this orb form that at times can be frustrating, but by the end lends itself to being pretty rad. The Red Long is a great environment inside this secret cave with the spectacle of a dragon that, while slightly easier due to it being this early in the game, can leave a lot of challenge if you're unprepared for it. You can't even fight this dragon until coming back to it later. Tiger Vanguard, again, this is a different one, guards Fubon and has a lot of health, plenty of mix-ups and ranged attacks, and is generally the better version of the Tiger Vanguards. Kangjin Long is very much an E3 type of fight. It has a lot of fun timings and makes use of a massive arena, but again, this is a spectacle that I would love to experience over and over again. Non-white is what I would call a pure fighter's fight. There isn't a big emphasis on arena or flashy moves, but he has a lot of fast combos and a ton of health. It's also multi-staged as you fight through the level. Non-able is like the Hitmonlee to non-white's Hitmonchamp, by only really using his legs, and the same compliments can be extended as the non-white fight, but this one is not really multi-staged. Non-void is the grandpa of these, and accordingly he uses spells and not physical damage to combat you. A lot of paper, a lot of fighting. This fight even has a weirder quest where you need to become a fox lady to fight him, but this one is really the best of the nons. Violet Spider is a big arena with a fun fight, webs to slow you down, poison to make you pop potions, and more tricks like her post-fight having a spider army attack you. The first time is why you fight this thing, but you stick around for all those not-so-friendly spiders. Yin Tiger is the blacksmith you see and never want to fight because he's so nice that you know he has a past. Eldin Wukong's secret hub area holds a boss that you have to choose to fight via text options. A solid, pure fighter's fight with some unique slams and moments that I think makes it stand out quite well. Zhao Long of Waves doesn't have a lot of attacks with a fast flurry of dives, tail swipes, lightning, and more. It's completely optional and the second best dragon fight, but the challenge lies in the timing of the dodges, and I think that made it something to look forward to every time. The Cloud Treading Deer was a boss that I didn't like at first. It had the blizzards that stuck me in place, did so much damage, and was annoying to move around. But the small health pool it had mixed up with the creativity of its attacks and the arena we fight it in made me appreciate it after I defeated it for some armor. Though it was tough, it was solid. Alright, now we're in the best of the best category. These are the reason you can tell a friend to buy the game. All of these bosses are the big hitters for some various reasons. Let me know if you agree or disagree with these picks. Black Long is a fantastic secret boss hidden in the sands. He uses great delays, big predictable swings, and makes great use of the environment with his lightning drumming that calls for you to get on top of the rocks in the arena. He also breaks the fourth wall a bit by banging the lightning to the beat of the song. Kangjin Star is what I figured Kangjin Long would have been, but this hot lady dragon uses lightning, timing, set pieces, and more to deliver a truly great fight on top of a lion turtle for a reason. The Green Cap Martialist has a long questline and a unique shrine associated to this fight for a reason. This is a truly amazing secret boss with a hula hoop of fire, long attacks with small windows to fight back, and mix-ups with creativity that you would think he was something even bigger. He also unlocks an entirely different way to play Wukong with the Spellbinder spell. This fight is fantastic. Zubaje, or Pigsy, is rightfully difficult. There is timing at play, range combat, combos, and an arena worthy of a fight. And this Tar holds you back from spamming dodge and instead makes you opt for timing. This fight is sick. Scorpion Lord is such a sick fight as well. Scorpion tail slams, claw swipes, fast flips around, poison AoEs. Just don't do what I did and come in overpowered, as this fight deserves you at your full respect. Dustveil is like a berserk apostle in Wukong, complete with the whole space turning into berserk and the makings of something wicked. A genuine challenge if not prepared either. There's really so much to see here, and I feel like what you're watching better justifies placement than anything I can say. Yellow Long is the best optional dragon boss. He doesn't offer so many unique attacks, but they are all new to learn and require precise timing that Wukong typically doesn't have. He mixes in lightning as you progress and has a ton of health. Bishui Goldeneye Beast is like Manus from Dark Souls, but set on fire. This guy is relentless, and without the fireproof mantle, I'm not sure you would see many people clear this fight. He is like a rabid dog named Princess that will never stop attacking. I like this challenge even if using the fireproof mantle and being overleveled admittedly made it a bit easier. Supreme Inspector is a talk to the hand man. A really dope boss that you had seen previously in the game is a massive guardian to the final location, and the guard of the Nimbus Cloud. Really large attacks from distance, massive timings needed. Emerald Arm Mantis is a boss that I imagine Miss Frizzle and the Magic School Bus would fight. Inside of Pigsy's stomach we go to take out the demonic prey mantis. This is a claustrophobic, weird, strong boss. Insane fast combos, mix-ups, and unforgettable fights, And I guess knowing that we're all up in the pig's guts killing a bug might have felt a little weird. Next time, use some Pepto-Bismol. The 100-Eyed Taoist Master is a fight that I absolutely dreaded every time until it just clicked. It starts with a massive team fight of these spider ladies, and after about a third in, you're battling it out with some great timings, grabs, and slams. The final third is where I really hated it because he does so much damage, stops your spells, and slows you down, reducing you to almost nothing. If you don't have an item that lets you skip the hardships, you are like me and really have to learn dodge timings. But that's what I came to appreciate after. He's a great boss with a greater fight, and he makes you have to get good in the final third. Every time I boot up this game, I look forward to this fight now. Erlong, the Sacred Divinity, the final one, is a really fantastic fight all around and is another that can only be summed up by what you're seeing on screen. This boss has delayed attacks, range, fast transformations, and he is a true competitor to Wukong for a reason. This fight calls for you to beat every chapter of the game, then come back to the Pagoda Shrine and head through the wall protecting him. Once you square off with him, you will fight the 4 Heavenly Kings, but those are separate on the list. What's not is the final act of this fight in a stronger lion version of Erlong, with easy but cool timings. If you don't abuse the heavy attack for health, this can be kind of brutal. But what holds us back from the runner-up is the fact that the hardest part is the first phase of the fight. Erlong, as I understand it, is Wukong's equal, so I was hoping for a Nameless King level of difficulty on the fight in the final phase, and that wasn't the case. Red Boy or Yaksha King is the runner-up for a reason. What do we even have to say here? Just here, have a cut-up of some of the best moments of Red Boy. Now imagine if Phase 2 turned into Devil May Cry or Metal Gear Rising. This fight just speaks for itself. The boss has incredible timing. Just look at this guy. Everything is great. The background is a giant goat nutsack behind you. You can't beat it. The Great Sage's Broken Shell is just the best fight in the entire game, and it's not close. I know this fight ran into some controversy for people because it was really difficult and required you to constantly have to attack, the boss would dodge, but I thought it was fantastic the way it was done. The only knock I have in this fight is that you can cheese the first phase by standing around and building up a heavy slam. But after that, it made me rethink my whole build to beat him. And if it wasn't for Ring of Fire healing, I think it would have taken much longer. Wukong is the GOAT for a reason, and you could tell so much passion was put into this fight. If you heal, he will steal your gourd and drink from it. If you try to attack, he'll warp around it. He will use all of your attacks better. There's nothing better than this. You are fighting Wukong while the sun sets behind you, and he is in his almost strongest form that he could possibly be. You are the final piece. Once he defeats you, he will be unstoppable. Player versus 3 times immortal. And by defeating him, the true ending, you were even rewarded with a wonderfully crafted final cutscene of animation. I just love this fight. So that's my list. And what do you think? My name is Evan, and hopefully I explained that pretty well. I'll see you guys next time.